turned out to die a long time ago.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan. It's been 13 years since Ned Stark's head fell from his body, but man, it still sends shivers up my spine. That single moment catapulted Game of Thrones into a cultural juggernaut, defying all of our expectations and proving that no one was safe. But what if I told you that that moment was not just the best thing for Game of Thrones in our world, but also the best thing for Westeros? In fact, Ned Stark's death saved Westeros from the White Walkers, and if he would have lived, then the world would have ended. That's right, Ned Stark dying was the best thing that could have happened to the Seven Kingdoms.
Wait. Didn't his death start like a massive civil war?
You're right, his death began the War of the Five Kings, but that was nothing compared to the potential destruction of Westeros by the White Walkers. I'm going to explain why, if Ned Stark had lived, Winterfell would have never prepared for the Night King. The White Walkers would have taken the castle and spread across all of Westeros and maybe even Essos. So a little recap because it has been a long time. In Season 1 of Game of Thrones, Ned Stark became Hand to the King Robert Baratheon.
Lord Eddard Stark, I would name you the Hand of the King.
While serving his hand, he finds out that Joffrey Baratheon is not a Baratheon at all, but rather a Lannister from the incestuous relationship between Cersei and Jaime Lannister.
Lord Orys Baratheon, black of hair. Axel Baratheon, black of hair. Joffrey Baratheon, golden head.
He stupidly confronts Cersei.
Your brother? Or your lover?
Robert dies.
Give it to the council after I'm dead.
And a whole bunch of political intrigue happens, and then Ned ends up in a cell for claiming that Stannis Baratheon is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne.
So, when the king dies...
The throne passes to his brother, Lord Stannis.
He's ready to go down with honor, but then Varys, the Master of Whispers, convinces him to lie and admit his treason so that he would live and his children would be spared.
What of your daughter's life, my lord? Is that a precious thing to you?
So Ned Stark admits to his treason, but he's killed anyways.
Bring me his head.
But shockingly, that was the best thing that could have happened for Westeros. If Joffrey wasn't, well, Joffrey, then Ned would have been sent to the Night's Watch.
And why would that be bad?
Well, here's the thing. Ned doesn't believe in White Walkers. They established that in episode 1.
The White Walkers have been gone for thousands of years.
To be fair, almost no one believed in White Walkers at this point. Now, I don't think Ned was crazy for that, but it's important that the precedent is set. So, you guys know how much I love Game of Thrones. We talk about it every week here on the channel. But what you may not know is that my love of Game of Thrones also extends to games. Like, I love playing Game of Thrones tabletop games because, well, it's just so much fun to control one of the great houses in Westeros. But now, I have finally found a mobile game that lets me control my own great house in Westeros, Game of Thrones Legends, the sponsor of this video. Game of Thrones Legends is one of my favorite kinds of mobile games, a puzzle role-playing game where you can recruit and level up different characters in your house. For instance, you can team up Daenerys Targaryen with her ancestor, Rhaenyra Targaryen. Now, all that's awesome, but I also love this kind of gameplay where you match puzzle battles and then set up combos with your character's special attacks to finish off enemies before they can counter-strike. But you can also pair up the characters with deadly weapons, like maybe you've always wanted to see Tormund Giantsbane wield ice, the ancestral sword of the Starks.
Say, that would be cool.
It is very cool. Plus, you can form alliances with your friends, compete in global rankings, and the game just looks stunning. Plus, you can also compete against other alliances in tournaments and special events. Actually, you know what? Let's form a ScreenCrush alliance, send me an invite, and I'll see you in game. All you have to do is download Game of Thrones Legends by clicking the link in the description or scan this QR code. Then you'll get 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token to start your journey. The link is below. Now, back to Game of Thrones. The first time the Night Watch sees a White Walker is in the 8th episode of the first season.
Lord Commander?
But even then, they still aren't really calling it a White Walker.
Bloody dead man tried to kill me.
In fact, the only person who uses that word is Samwell Tarly.
They were touched by White Walkers.
Even after there's a White Walker in Castle Black, there is still a sense of disbelief. If Ned was allowed to take the Black, he would have left King's Landing in episode 9 or 10. Remember, back in the early seasons of Game of Thrones, there was a very defined sense of scale to Westeros. It would have taken Ned Stark over a month to get to Winterfell and even longer to get to the Wall. By the time he made it to Winterfell, the White Walker incident would have already been weeks in the past, and it would have been overshadowed by his own personal drama with the King. The point is, I doubt if this incident would have been emphasized to Ned Stark, and I doubt he would believe that it was a true White Walker. Most importantly, Ned would have never gone beyond the wall. He would miss the expedition to find Benjen Stark completely. Remember, that expedition heads out in episode 10.
What about future expeditions?
Well, I doubt he would have gone on those either. In the North, people really liked Ned Stark.
And Lord Stark is one man in 10,000.
Jon struggles with his lineage at the Wall in season 1, but I doubt that Ned would have faced the same struggles, especially when Lord Commander Mormont never came back from that Benjen expedition. Remember, Lord Commander Mormont dies in season 3, but Jon Snow isn't elected the new Lord Commander until season 5. During season 4, Alliser Thorne is Lord Commander, but he loses the position to Jon by 1 vote. Now, if Alliser lost to Jon, the boy who literally lived with the wildlings, then he definitely would have lost to Ned Stark. In fact, Ned Stark would have beaten both him and Jon. He would have been the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and that would have been terrible. You see, in order for the White Walkers to be stopped, Jon had to be Lord Commander.
Or because of like the prophecy?
Kind of. I mean, if you say Jon is the prince who was promised, then yes. But what made Jon the best commander against the White Walkers wasn't fate, it was the time he spent with the wildlings. For all of season 3, Jon Snow lives beyond the wall with the wildlings, and that is where Jon truly learns the huge threat that's posed by the White Walkers. It was not direct exposure to the White Walkers that convinced him. It was discovering that there was still magic in Westeros. When he's with the wildlings, he sees giants and wargs, both of which are considered fairy tales south of the wall.
No such thing as giants. A story for the children.
He sees this magic with his own 2 eyes.
If my father had seen the things that I've seen, he'd also tell you to burn the dead before nightfall.
And if that magic still exists, then so can the horrific magic of the White Walkers. He also sees that the wildlings are still afraid of the White Walkers.
How many men were here?
About 300.
And you know what those men are now.
He may not share every single wildling belief, but they do know their way around the North, so if they're scared of White Walkers, then there's a reason. When Jon Snow returned to the Night's Watch, he knew the threat they were up against. Because Ned Stark would not go beyond the wall, he would not grasp the threat until much later, probably not until the Massacre of Hardhome in season 5. Also, side note, if Ned Stark took the Black, there is a good chance that Jon Snow never makes it past season 4. Remember, they considered beheading him for sleeping with Ygritte.
I lay with a wildling girl.
The law is the law. The boy must die.
And Ned Stark is a man who is obsessed with honor. The first scene we ever see of Ned is him beheading a crow who broke his oath.
Sentence you to die.
Now, I'm not saying he would be happy about it, but he'd probably say that Jon had to die for going against his vows. But I digress. Let's say that Jon lives and gets to warn everybody, including Ned, about the White Walkers. Even if Ned understood the threat, I'm not sure how much of it would have mattered because he would never have the same sympathy for the wildlings that Jon developed. After all, as Lord of Winterfell, Ned's only seen wildlings under the worst of circumstances, when they've crossed the wall and brought harm to others. He has spent years killing them. Jon, on the other hand, had good memories with the wildlings, especially with Ygritte. Jon's sympathies are part of the reason certain wildlings get to live south of the wall in season 5, and that is very important. Remember, the Night King composed his army primarily of wildlings. Jon's whole reason for letting them live south of the wall is so that they can't become extra soldiers for the White Army.
If we abandon them, you know what they become.
Ned Stark would have never allowed that, so a lot of wildlings would have ended up as whites. Remember, the humans won the Battle of Winterfell just by the skin of their teeth. So if the White Army was even bigger, there's no way Winterfell could have won. It would have fallen, and the rest of Westeros was pretty unconcerned with the White Walkers.
The dead will come north first. Enjoy dealing with them. We will deal with whatever is left of you.
So if Winterfell went down, all of Westeros would go down.
But wait, didn't the whole wildling south of the wall thing make Jon pretty disliked?
In fact, a Night Watch mutiny killed him for it.
For the watch.
But he did not stay dead, and that's all because he knew the original Bad Witch, Melisandre. So Jon Snow meets Melisandre by way of Stannis Baratheon, one of the men who vied for the throne in the War of the Five Kings. If Ned Stark was around, it's unlikely they would have ever met, or at the very least, there's no way Melisandre would have stuck around.
Or there wouldn't be a War of the Five Kings at all.
Well, I disagree. Remember, Ned admitted he was a traitor, and it didn't stop the war. Maybe if he would have lived, then Robb would not have kept up his attack, but I think Stannis and Renly still would have fought. I mean, maybe not the Greyjoy since their motivation was Winterfell being undefended. And of course, there's still Daenerys. So the War of the Five Kings, or I guess War of the Three Kings, would have happened regardless. But there is no way that Ned Stark would ever agree to talk to Stannis. Part of Ned's treason was telling Stannis that he was the rightful heir, and he falsely admitted to treason to spare his children. He went against his honor to protect his family. Even though he thinks Stannis was the rightful ruler, he would not negotiate with him simply because Stannis could land the Starks in more hot water. And if he couldn't talk to Stannis, Stannis, then Melisandre would have never come to Castle Black. So even if Ned Stark did the right thing and let wildling live south of the Wall to stop the growth of the Night King's army, it would all be for naught. Instead of Jon, Ned would be the target of the mutiny and he would die. But let's be real, they'd probably also go after Jon because they knew that he would avenge his father. Melisandre would not be there to revive him, so he would stay dead. The butterfly effect is that Winterfell would have fallen to the White Walkers no matter what. Jon had to die and be revived because his death is what allows him to leave the Night Watch. They claim that he's already served his term.
You swore a vow.
Aye, I pledged my life to the Night's Watch. I gave my life.
For all knights to come.
They killed me, Ed, my own brothers.
So then he goes back home, becomes Lord of Winterfell, and prepares for the White Walker attack. He instituted training for every man and woman of age.
Everyone, aged 10 to 60, will drill daily with spears, pikes, bow and arrow.
Not just the boys. We can't defend the North if only half the population is fighting.
And he got Daenerys to fight for the North. Remember, one of the points that convinced her was the Dragonglass mine under Dragonstone, and the only person who could ever find out about that was Jon, because he was friends with Samwell Tarly.
That's Dragonglass.
A mountain of it beneath the ground. Jon needs to know.
What makes Game of Thrones so good is that every action has consequences. That also means that in order for Westeros to beat the White Walkers, a lot of things had to fall into place. Benjen had to go missing, so Jon would travel north of the Wall and spend time with the wildlings. The wildlings have to live south of the Wall, so the White Army wouldn't grow larger. Stannis, Melisandre, and Davos had to be at Castle Black because Jon had to die and be resurrected. Even Robb had to die, so Jon would become Lord of Winterfell and convince Daenerys to fight for the North. Any slight deviation could have cost them the Battle of Winterfell, and Ned would have ruined all of it. He would not have let the wildlings live south of the Wall. Melisandre would not have been around, so Jon could not be revived to become Lord of the North. And if that doesn't happen, then there's no alliance with Dany, Winterfell isn't prepared, and wow, look, now all of Westeros is taken over by White Walkers, and they probably would have frozen the Narrow Sea and conquered Essos as well. If Ned Stark had not started the War of the Five Kings, then there was no way that Westeros could be prepared for the White Walkers. He was the show's sacrificial lamb. And in the real world, it was amazing for the show. First, let me transport you back to 2011. The last Harry Potter movie just came out, Charlie Sheen was having a meltdown, and you couldn't go anywhere without hearing Party Rock Anthem on the radio.
Ever since that song came out, every day they've been shuffling.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, right, like you totally remember that. Now, during all that, the first season of Game of Thrones aired on HBO, and at the forefront of all the promotional materials was none other than Sean Bean. The Game of Thrones cast became household names throughout its 8-season run, but at the time, none of them were like famous. Some, like Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage, were known in the UK, but hadn't really made a name for themselves in the US. Others, like Emilia Clarke, Kit Harington, and Richard Madden, were pretty much unknown. Then, in the middle of this otherwise humble cast, there's Sean Bean. Lord of the Rings Sean Bean, James Bond Sean Bean, very famous Sean Bean. On an instinctive level, we all know that TV is a business. Famous actors bring in viewers, and viewers in turn bring in money. As Andy Bundle put it in an article for Sci-Fi, no one kills off the character whose face is on the side of the bus. Westeros, after all, was a product of real-life TV studios. It had to adhere to studio rules. But then, they killed him, and it was brilliant. Suddenly, Westeros was a world divorced from TV practices, divorced from our own expectations and assumptions. Our hero wouldn't live just because he was the hero. Like the real world, no one was safe. And fans loved that. They liked the show with real stakes. It made every episode exciting and nerve-wracking. Ned's death set a precedent for Game of Thrones that ultimately catapulted it to historic success. Between season 1 and season 2, the show's viewership grew by 2 million. Almost every season enjoyed similar viewership gains, and it's all because one honorable man lost his head. So, on a meta level, Ned dying was the best thing that could happen to Game of Thrones. And in universe, he had to die, so there was a butterfly effect that led to Jon as head of Winterfell to destroy the White Walkers. So what do you think? Do you think that Ned had to die, or would he have found a way to stop the White Walkers? Just a reminder, everyone, to download Game of Thrones Legends, click the link in the description or scan this QR code and you will get 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token. Big shout out to the writer of this video, Brianna McLarty. You could find her socials and mine in the links below. So let us know your thoughts down in the comments or add us on our socials. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.